This is Nan McKay, and this is the story of Stockton Williams. Stockton was appointed executive director of the National Council of State Housing Agencies in March 2018. NCSHA's State Housing Finance Agency members have delivered nearly $500 billion in financing to make possible the purchase, the development, and the rehabilitation of more than 7 million affordable homes for low and moderate income households. So Stockton leads NCSHA's wide-ranging efforts to advocate and strengthen the central role of state HFAs in the nation's housing system. So Stockton, tell us, how has the coronavirus affected you personally?
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, Nan. I'm a big fan, and it's a lot of fun to get a chance to speak with you. The coronavirus has affected me and our team at the National Council of State Housing Agencies, I suspect, in many of the same ways people in our industry have been affected. On the one hand, we have more to do than ever, perhaps, because of the housing-related impacts that the virus is having around the country. And our member housing finance agencies are really being called upon to do even more than they normally do to provide affordable housing. At the same time, our group here in Washington, D.C. Are teleworking and juggling schedules and dealing with challenges both personally and professionally as we're trying to serve our members. So the coronavirus is playing out for us at NCSHA in many ways, I suspect, like it is for people who are listening to the podcast.
So is the state HFA an essential business?
It depends. In most states, the state housing finance agencies have at least some of their senior and mid-level staff in the office for some or part of the time. As I suspect your listeners are aware, the housing finance agencies are active in both single-family home ownership financing as well as rental housing financing. They also administer grant programs and manage contracts. So there's an array of responsibilities that agencies have, even in conditions like we're dealing with today. And so while the characterization of the agency itself may vary somewhat from state to state, they are all fully operating and in every case have staff that are active both in the office and in a teleworking capacity.
What do you find is the hardest part about being an essential business and being open today?
Well, certainly if you're in the business of housing finance, which our members are, the state HFAs, there are so many aspects of mortgage finance and development finance that require other parties, whether they're lawyers or accountants or public officials at various levels of government, or the actual developers and owners and operators of affordable housing developments. And our industry has always largely been based on the face-to-face interaction and collaboration of all the different people that it takes to get an affordable housing development financed or a first-time home buyer into their home. In most states, at least some of these businesses, some of these professions are closed or severely limited in their ability to operate. And so just in terms of operating and executing on their mission, that reality of the pandemic has posed a number of challenges for state housing finance agencies.
Do you find that there's far fewer closings than there used to be in the environment?
Well, it's interesting, Nan. In the first couple of months of all this, the data that we have from the housing finance agencies suggests that there has still been, in almost every state, a consistent pipeline of applications and closings for single-family homes, and in most cases, significant activity on the multifamily side as well. There are some exceptions in some smaller states, which typically don't have as much activity to begin with. There's been less, but there are certainly parts of the country, as your listeners will know, where the home buying business, home selling and home building is going pretty well, actually. And there are certainly places where multifamily developments continue to receive financing and start construction. And so far early on, business is good for housing finance agencies.
So people aren't complaining or telling you that they can't walk through a home or a unit in order to figure out if they want to buy it.
Well, I'm sure there are cases in communities where it's harder to get that in-person visit to a home that you might want to buy, or for that matter, to go out and walk a construction site or get all your contractors and subs on the job. But in general, the housing market has been resilient, and the affordable housing segment of it, which is of course where the state housing finance agencies have focused, has held up pretty well. Now there are all kinds of warning signs that I'm sure we'll get to, but at least as we speak today, the housing finance agencies and their inventory and relationships have held up very well in the first 8 weeks or so of this emergency.
With your experience in housing, what do you think will be the effect of COVID-19 on the housing market?
I think, we all come into this understanding that we had huge housing affordability needs, both in terms of for sale homes and rental apartments, even before the pandemic struck. So that's sort of where we and everyone listening begins. But even setting that aside, when you look at the historic levels of unemployment and the projections by a number of economists that many millions of jobs that have been lost will be permanently lost, we can absolutely expect that for both renters, new or recent home buyers, and those who would like to advance in the housing market, who are of more modest means, are going to face enormous economic challenges in the months ahead. Right now, these don't seem to be as acute because, of course, the resources that Congress provided in terms of unemployment insurance, direct cash payments, and other supports are still flowing. The payroll protection program for businesses, those dollars are starting to get to the people and the businesses that need them. That's a good thing, but they won't last forever. And as we get into summer and then to fall, we're very concerned, and there's very strong consensus among housing forecasters that we will see a real spike in mortgage delinquencies, likely a jump in mortgage foreclosures, and potentially real problems for multifamily developments that are in process to secure all the financing that they will need to be completed. There also will be enormous stress on low-income renters who, as you know and your listeners do, are in a number of cases protected for the time being from the threat of eviction under federal policy. But ultimately, when those forbearance periods end, all the rent for the accrued period of time will come due. And we expect this will be an unsustainable financial burden for many renters, which will, of course, have ripple effects on property owners and throughout the system. So we're very worried, not so much about what's happening today or what will happen tomorrow, but in the weeks and months ahead, that there will be significant stress on the affordable housing segment of the broader housing system.
I worry about people who are losing their job permanently and the effect of that on low-income housing needs. We already have long waiting lists for subsidized housing with no new construction, other than tax credit, since about the 1980s. Do you think Congress will put more funding into subsidized housing to accommodate for this?
Well, we certainly hope so. And this is a timely conversation because just yesterday, the House of Representatives put out its version of a next fiscal stimulus bill, which does include $100 billion in emergency rental assistance and another $75 billion that would run through state housing finance agencies for both homeowner as well as rental assistance. So we are hopeful and working with others to make the case for there to be increased in federal investment But you never know. This bill that the House Democrats have unveiled is really just the opening bid, and it's unclear at this point whether the Senate and the White House will go along. And even if there is ultimately a next stimulus package, which I believe there will be, how much we'll be able to get for affordable housing. So for listeners who are still in the advocacy game, so to speak, we'll certainly look forward to working with you, as we're already working with many, to make the case, because we absolutely know that we're going to need it for the next several months, when the economic pain increases and the initial flows of income supports begin to end.
Families on the voucher program are having difficulty finding units to rent because of rental prices in many markets. If we're already looking at increased rents, what do you think the availability of affordable housing will be if we don't get any more new construction?
Right. I mean, I think, as is always the case in real estate, the market effects will vary by locality, but, in general, or speaking nationally, we already had a deficit of, some number of millions, depending on which study you look at, in terms of the number of units that are available and affordable to low and extremely low income renters. And that's likely going to get worse. We're having a harder and harder time producing new affordable multifamily apartments. That gap between demand and supply was continuing to grow for all kinds of reasons. And while some have suggested that with so many renters in need of affordable housing, owners of affordable apartments who may lose some tenants when forbearance policies end and they're unable to pay all their back rent. We think that's a short-sighted way of looking at it, because in a severe economic recession, which we could certainly expect to be in for the foreseeable future, it's hard to imagine landlords being in position to significantly raise rents, or to put it another way, to find enough tenants who can afford to pay the rent that the landlord needs to operate the property. So we think it's sort of a double whammy that will affect not only the ability to develop and create new affordable housing, but also will be very problematic for owners of existing affordable apartments.
That is very interesting. Yeah, it's a different twist on it, and something certainly to take a look at and think about. What thoughts do you have for people today if they're thinking of either renting or buying?
Oh gosh, well, I'm not a realtor or much of an expert, other than having bought and sold a few homes of my own for my family over the years. In a lot of markets, there is today an opportunity to access low-cost mortgage financing. I mean, that's a silver lining of these very low borrowing costs and this sort of broader economic situation that we're in. For folks who are in a market where there is some inventory on the market, this could be a pretty good time, and it's why one of the priorities of the National Council of State Housing Agencies and our member HFAs is to make sure that the central plumbing of the affordable housing finance system, the government-sponsored enterprises, FHA, all of the kind of things that make affordable housing financing flow remain functional and responsive to the economic conditions that we're in, because we do have low interest rates. While we've got historic unemployment, we still have lots of families and individuals who are working, many of whom would like to become homeowners. And so that's an opportunity with good underwriting to get more people into houses that they can afford. But it's going to be critical for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Ginnie Mae to adjust and calibrate their policies and work more flexibly and responsibly with the lenders and the housing finance agencies and others to make sure that, at least for those who are in position to have something good happen in their housing situation during this period of time, that can happen.
Well, thank you so much for your advice and counsel and just your thoughts in this area. You know, you work in this every day, you're concerned about it every day. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Same to you, Nan. Thanks very much.